Can everyone hear me okay? Great. All right. Thank you very much. Well, welcome this evening. My name is Bart Thurber, and I'm the Ann Hendricks Bass Director here at the Francis Lehman Loeb Art Center. I got through all of that without making a mistake, which is a good sign to begin with. And I'm here with Christopher Rothko, whom I'm going to be introducing in just a moment. Want to give you an idea. We've been through the slides a couple different times, but it's not scripted at all, or at least my part is not scripted. Haven't. And so it is a conversation and prompted by many of the works, and it'll provide a nice introduction for those of you who are not familiar with Rothko, and hopefully lots of new insights for those of you who are familiar with the work of Mark Rothko. And then I'm especially excited because we're going to get a preview of the upcoming retrospective that Christopher has co-organized in Florence, which opens up the 14th of March. And he'll be showing us a number of slides that show images of that upcoming installation. The first image that I'm going to start with is actually one from here at Taylor Hall, in fact, taken just on the other side of this wall in 1964. It was actually the earliest image that I could find of the painting that we have called number 1, and then in parentheses, number 18, 1948, from 1948-49. What's truly incredible about this, and I wanted to take this opportunity, is because this is part of a lecture series that we refer to as the Claflin Lecture Series, in honor of Agnes Ringe Claflin, who was just about a contemporary of Mark Rothko, born in 1900. And in fact, she came here first in 1923, then went back for her master's and PhD, became a full professor in 1931, and taught here until her retirement in 1965. She was also the director of what was then known as the Vassar Art Gallery from 1943 to, I should have these, actually I do have these dates, 1943 to 62. And it was during this period of time that your father's painting came to Vassar. And what really struck me in particular was to see this painting, which you can see in the background there, alongside a wonderful Joan Mitchell from 1951. There's also the Henry Moore, which you'll currently see, actually both of these on view. Barbara Hepworth, a number of modern real masterpieces that were already here at Vassar beginning in the 1940s, 1950s, and then in this image that we can see, 1964. We're going to talk more in detail about this particular work, but I think this is a tribute also to Agnes Ringe Claflin as a professor, because one of her students was Blanchette Hooker Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller, I believe the third's wife. And it was she who donated this painting, along with many other 105 works in all that she donated during her lifetime to Vassar. Extremely generous. But as you will see how unusual it was, by comparison, I was thinking, and I think I mentioned to you, is that at this point in 1964, the museums at Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, none of them had an early Rothko. But actually, as you pointed out, neither did MoMA at this point. So just exactly how unusual this was. And so it's in honor of Agnes Ringe Claflin that we dedicate this series to. So with that, I'm going to actually introduce Christopher here. Christopher Rothko, the second of Mark and Mary Alice Rothko's 2 children, is a psychologist, writer, and for the last 30 years, the custodian of the Rothko legacy, in partnership with his sister Kate. He is editor of his father's book of philosophical writings, The Artist Reality, which we'll talk about briefly in a moment. His own book of essays, which I have right here, Mark Rothko, From the Inside Out, was published in 2015 by Yale University Press. Dr. Rothko has helped prepare more than 24 Rothko exhibitions at museums and galleries around the globe, and was co-curator of the monumental Rothko retrospective in Paris in 2023-2024, and the upcoming exhibition at the Palazzo Strozzi in Florence. He is the past chair of the Rothko Chapel Board and currently head of Opening Spaces campaign. Most importantly, though, I want to add that you and your wife, Lori, who's here, are the parents of a Vassar graduate, Aaron, class of 2020, who unfortunately could not be here with us. So with that, I'm going to open it up, and I didn't know if you wanted to read this or how you wanted to start here.
Sure, I'm happy to read this. So this is...
Is it just...
Oh, nobody told me I actually had to do any work here. And I'm actually a sound guy. Little disappointing. So this is a quote from my father's unfinished book of philosophical writings about the history of art. In fact, he nowhere in this book mentions that he's an artist, talks about his own art. He's talking really from a third-person perspective about what it means to be a painter. What is the role of the painter in society? What does art bring to the viewer? So this is a quote from that book, and I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to use that as just a very just a little sort of suggestion for a theme that hopefully we'll continue to return to as we talk tonight. So the progression of a painter's work as it travels in time from point to point will be toward clarity, toward the elimination of obstacles between the painter and the idea, and between the painter, the idea, and the observer. So that's, I think that's a goal that if any of you are artists, and I suspect there are a few artists out here, that I think that's a goal that would resonate with most artists, but the question is, how do you realize that? How do you put that into practice? And we're going to look at a fair bit of artwork tonight and see if we can get some understanding about how that was true for Rothko.
So this is kind of the beginning here. This is 1923. This is your grandmother, is that correct?
That's right. This is my father's mother. Now, we always understood this. When I say we, I'm talking about my sister and me. And I understand that our father passed away when I was very young and she was still a teenager. We've always understood this as his first work. The author of the catalog Resonate suggests it's number 13. In any case, it's quite early. It's actually been fixed up a bit since this point. I think my sister and I agree it looked better before, but this is from sometime in the late 1920s, and it's obviously it's in a figurative style. He paints as a figurative painter for a better part of 20 years before he moves into other styles. For us, it really sort of almost evokes a feeling of like a Russian icon. He was born in what's today Latvia, was then part of the Russian Empire. And it just has that feel, but certainly he is referencing historical models when he paints this work.
And then we move along just about 20 years here, during which I think you indicated that there were no less, again, for the artist in the audience, produced over 500 paintings, close to how many hundreds of drawings and works on paper during this period of time. This particular work is in your collection?
No, it's in my sister's collection. Both of those works are in my sister's collection, so I tried to have some continuity here. But my point in juxtaposing these two is there's obviously a separation of quite a few years and 500 or more paintings, and major stylistic changes in between that we're going to actually go through in a minute. But the question is, can we find clarity in the first painting, and how much clarity do we find in this painting that is in Rothko's quote-unquote mature style? So I'm not going to answer that now, and I don't know that there is an answer, but I think that's something just to think about. What is his process? What is his progress towards clarity? And what does clarity look like for Rothko? What is he trying to achieve in that clarity between idea and observer, particularly? I think he's very concerned from day one about communicating with the audience. This is not something that he does art for art's sake, art for himself. It's something that he's always trying to have a conversation with the viewer.
So then we go to something very, very different. I think that if this were to come up on an exam for many students, they would not identify these as Rothko paintings.
I think that's pretty accurate, and I chose these three in part because they're all in the Florence show, and in fact most of the works we show tonight are in the Florence show, but this is him really referencing historical examples, a sort of classic odalisque on the left, and a pretty direct reference to the Vermeer. I'm blanking on the name of the Vermeer painting, but
Woman by the Window?
Woman by the Window. This is actually known as Portrait of Mary. Most of his paintings are not titled, but Mary actually gets a title. And this is actually a deliciously sumptuous painting. The brown is a chocolate you want to eat, and that blue dress is diaphanous and just has so many colors underneath it, and the jacket is just him going back and just scraping away the surface until he creates texture. So it's actually, I think, an early masterpiece for him. It's hanging in my sister's hall right now, but I'm stealing it for Florence. So she's not so pleased with me right now.
So, of course, by presenting these three works together, I'm really interested in this theme of the window, which seems to reappear a lot, and again, emphasizing the relationship between interior and exterior is something, again, that you see even in several other images coming up during this period of so-called figuration.
Yes, and it's something that's going to continue because there are many critics who talk about later Rothkos as essentially windows. I actually think it's an interesting analogy, but I don't think it's something that you look out of. It's really something that invites you to look into. So that interiority, exteriority, it's always a question with Rothko, but I think in general he wants you looking in rather than looking out. These paintings also, yes, they reference classic examples. They also have architectural features, which is a big piece that we're touching on in Florence because we're really having his reaction not just to Florence, a city he loved, and also ancient Rome, which he looked at a great deal, but we're looking at the architecture as well, which was a very strong influence on him.
Yeah, fascinating. This one I have no comment on, so I don't know if you wanted to comment. I know it was a very personal painting for your parents.
So this is one of my father's last paintings in the figurative style, and it's along with a few others that have a lot of similarities. You can actually see him simplifying his compositional process even at this point, and really looking more at the sort of structural aspects rather than trying to reveal aspects of personality or really realistically paint the figure. That said, I do think this is one of his 2 or 3 best nudes, and he painted quite a few, including this model multiple times. But this hung in my parents' bedroom for the entirety of their 23-year marriage. And my mother just referred to it as the girl with the pointed ass. So she was like family.
And this is already into the 1940s.
This is 1939. So we're going to make a little shift if we want to. Since you have no comment about this painting,
I have no comment about this painting. How could I possibly add to any of that?
We'll make a little jump in terms of his journey to clarity. If technology cooperates. So these are 2 pages from the manuscript of his uncompleted book, The Artist's Reality. And what he does in about 1940, so roughly a year after he paints that nude, is he stops painting for a year. Now understand that he has a day job all this time. He has a day job up until 1961, which is just 9 years before his death, because even after he becomes well known in 1950, he still can't support himself as an artist. He's teaching art to young children, which he loves, and he actually starts this book as a book about teaching art to children, and ends up going someplace very different with it. But in any case, he takes a year off from painting, trying to find his way and trying to figure out how he's going to express himself, and he thinks, maybe that he can do it better as a writer, and he's going through all these different ideas in the book, which I think are hugely important for him finding his way as a painter. But at some point during that year, when he's also reading a lot of philosophy, Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, reading a lot of Shakespeare and Greek tragedy. Somewhere in that year, he realizes that he can actually paint these ideas better than he can write them, and having edited this book, I would agree. So he eventually puts the manuscript aside, as far as we can tell, never returns to it. This is around 1941, and starts painting again, but with a lot of stylistic differences. But again, this is all part of that journey to clarity that he's trying to get his ideas, make sure that his ideas are in order before he starts painting them. And I think if you read this book, which I encourage you to, although I can't say it's an easy read, you can see that the ideas are already 7 or 8 years ahead of his paintings. What he's talking about in these, it sounds like he's talking about his classic abstractions, and in fact, he hasn't painted an abstract painting yet. They're not; those paintings are still 8 or 9 years away.
So were there plans already while he was still alive to publish this at the end of his life as part of that authorized biography?
Yes, so he engaged with the art historian Robert Goldwater, who was an early fan of his work, and they had discussions, what ended up being late in both of their lives, about Goldwater doing a sort of a critical biography of my father, and this book was going to be central to that process. But unfortunately, my father died in 1970, and Goldwater died just, I think, six or 9 months afterwards. So that did not happen. But my father never abandoned this. He never threw it out. He never disavowed it. He just hadn't really done much with it.
So this comes back to, it's really fascinating to see, and as you point out, this journey to clarity about this episode of surrealism, which many of the New York school were deeply involved with during this period of the 1940s. This is Tiresias, 1944.
So starting in 1941, or even in somewhere in 1940, my father starts painting again, but it's in a new style, sort of the first of a couple different surrealist styles, based very actively on the myth. Most often Greek myth, but not necessarily Babylonian, Egyptian. He was quite ecumenical in his choice of myths, but he saw this as a way to a universal language. That these myths, whatever culture they're from, the same stories, the same sort of crux points and crucial issues that they bring up, they reappear across cultures. He thought, okay, this is a language that I can use in my painting that's going to touch people from everywhere and across time. So he made a lot of paintings with specific mythic titles tied to specific myths, and these evolved over a 4 or 5 year period. Tiresias is already in that sort of secondary, much more abstracted mythical style, and it's one of his last paintings that references a specific myth. And he'd been working on this for several years. There are many, many preparatory drawings for this. It's quite a large painting, one of his largest from this period. But he never wrote anything specific about the Tiresias myth, but you have to wonder, both at the soothsayer, which he talks a lot about the artist as a figure who is going to essentially step in the modern era for the sage and the prophet and the theologian and the philosopher. So Tiresias sort of fills that role, but also Tiresias is the figure who was both male and female in different parts of their life, I guess we would say. So, so is there something that's very universal in that as well? And this is just for us to surmise about. He never says anything, even though this myth clearly occupies him a great deal.
I'm noticing a number of these paintings from this period, he uses a very vertical format. And so while he's breaking down the figure, it still has a somewhat anthropomorphic figurative style to it. And that's even more so. There we go.
So these paintings are a year or year plus on from Tiresias, and they are both entitled Personnage. These are amongst the last 8 or 10 paintings he paints that have any real vestige of figuration in them. And you can literally line these paintings up and watch the figure break apart across them. So you can still see, as you're mentioning, there's an anthropomorphic element, there's still a vertical element. You can also see the sort of Rothko classic tripartite structure to the canvas creeping in there, although, as you will see in just a moment, that's going to disappear for a few years. But yes, he ends up saying in later years that he and his generation ended up giving up the figure in the mid-1940s, which, let's remember, this is right at the time of of World War II and the Holocaust. And he said, we gave up the figure because all we could do was mutilate it.
And obviously the muted palette that he's adapting seems to be consistent during this period of time as well.
Yes. There are more colorful works, but that sort of beigey background, that sort of nebulous field, is pretty typical.
Mm-hmm.
These are two more paintings along that journey to the end of figuration, and again, share that same sort of not quite a color background.
So then that takes us next to multiform. And this is Untitled 1948. And I think you indicated to me that there are about 60, 70 paintings that he does in this so-called multiform period of time from the late 1940s just into 1950.
That's right. So it's actually the shortest period of his work, of his career, about 3 years. And although still a lot of paintings from that time, very few works on paper. So back in the surrealist phase, he paints like 100 watercolors on paper that are just magical and light and full of drawing, things that you would not really expect from Rothko. But in this phase, there are only a couple of works on paper, almost everything on canvas, and you can see that although we still have that beige background, color has definitely leaped to the forefront. He is, by all appearances, given up figuration, and that also partition of the canvas, whether you want to see it as seascape, land, and sky, that's gone, and it's not going to reappear until 1949.
Yeah, it's fascinating, especially when everyone afterwards is encouraged. We'll have a reception in the just outside in the atrium, and then to go see the two paintings, which we'll be talking about in just a moment. But this organization of the picture field that evolves during this period of 47, 48, 49 that we'll be looking at more carefully in the galleries. And here we are to precisely these two paintings.
Do you want to talk a little bit about why these two paintings are here?
Sure. So Christopher, fortunately, he doesn't hold it against me or the Loeb in general, but he had asked for the Loeb's picture, which you can see over on the right-hand side, which was painted again, 48, 49, gifted already by Blanchette Hooker Rockefeller, class of 1931, already in 1955, which was really quite amazing. Talk a little bit more about that. But as a multiform, I think you've indicated one of the most successful from this period of time, had requested it for Paris in the exhibition in 2023, 2024, which unfortunately for him coincided with our 30th anniversary. And so we ended up not lending it to that particular exhibition. So you did not hold back and came back to us yet again to exhibit it and to lend it for Florence for the upcoming exhibition. I said yes, having met with the team here, and we discussed the different options. However, in exchange, we wanted a painting from his collection for a period of 18 months. So while the painting will be gone about 5 months, February to August.
This guy cuts a mean deal.
You need to read the fine print, I'll just say that. Is to actually then have the opportunity of juxtaposing these two multiform paintings, which is really extraordinary for us, I would say for any institution. So we've been very fortunate to have these now on view for several months. Our painting on the right-hand side will be leaving in February, but at least we'll have the one painting. And then I threw in that he also had to do a program for us this evening. So that was the... But if go ahead.
No, but this really made me extremely happy because I think you called me the custodian of the Rothko legacy. I don't consider myself the owner of the painting on the left. I consider myself the custodian, so the opportunity to put it in conversation with another painting, to have it come to a great art institution like this, and have lots of people who might otherwise not get to see it, see the two of them together. That was music to my ears. It was not too hard to sell. The lecture was a bit tougher, but I'm here anyway.
For which we're very grateful. I'll just add a few things. Again, as many of you are already familiar. If you're not, you'll have a chance to see the two paintings in the galleries. But really how extraordinary it is that this work of art already came to Vassar in 1955. As I mentioned, no other institution that I know of, at least collegiate, but even MoMA, had an early multiform painting. Blanchette Hooker Rockefeller purchased this already, and this is published information. We typically don't talk about values, but she purchased this in 1950 from Betty Parsons' gallery, where your father was just beginning to show at that time, along with a number of other artists from the New York School. She purchased it for $1,000 and then had it installed in what was referred to as the Rockefellers' Guest House on East 52nd Street, very near MoMA. And ultimately, a lot of large-scale paintings. There's a great photograph of your father with Robert Motherwell, both of them standing there with their paintings. But that house she ended up gifting to MoMA already in 1955. And clearly, Agnes Rindge-Claflin was after her for some gifts. And so she already gave it to Vassar in 1955. Although somebody also had the fine print there. It traveled for a number of years, so it really wasn't until about 61 that it came back here. But if you could talk a little bit about the 1947 painting in particular.
Sure. So, and just reminding everyone of our journey to clarity here. We've moved from figuration into surrealism as a way of trying to get his ideas more directly across to the viewer. He ends up, I think, feeling that those myths were also somebody else's story. And I think he also was a little mistrustful of narrative as a way of connecting directly to the viewer, because he's not really interested in talking to you here, he's interested in talking to you here, and eventually getting here, but he wants to really get inside you. So he moves into full abstraction, very colorful abstraction in 46. The painting on the left is probably a late 47 painting. And you can see that he's starting to organize the canvas here compared to the one that we had just seen. There are some more strongly horizontal elements. The areas of color becoming a little more regular, but it's really, I think, being driven still mostly by the color. And it's very vibrant. There are many layers of color. So if you go next door and take a look at this painting, you can really start counting layers, 8, 10, 12 in some areas, layers of paint that make up the colors that you're seeing. And with the Vassar painting, which is the Loeb painting, which is roughly a year or a little more later, you can see that he's carried that simplification process further, that he's organizing the canvas a little more. There are fewer areas of color. There is more of a background color. And as Dr. Thurber was pointing out earlier to me, he's at this point starting to stain the canvas rather than using a thicker paint, which is something that he doesn't do with every painting, but consistently it does it more and more and more as he goes on through his career, so that by a decade after this, by the 1960s, almost everything is thinned with so much turpentine that there's really just a color that seeps into the canvas. But he's already doing it here.
And you mentioned to me that these are prepared canvases, but just with a ground layer that he's applied, not any sort of gesso.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, it really, again, when you have a chance to see them up close in the galleries, looking carefully, it's remarkable in the span of just about a year or so. The one on the left-hand side is just built up with these layers, and then, as you point out, with the one here, that is really almost like a stain painting. And I didn't actually, I've never counted the layers, but you got to have a good eye for these. So we'll move on to some of the other multiform paintings here.
So really starting with your painting, belongs to all of you. With your painting, there's a rapid acceleration to what we think of as the classic work. It's really a year or less than a year, and you see painting by painting him simplifying, him him organizing the canvas more, fewer areas of color. They're getting more rectilinear. Again, I don't think he would call it simplifying. I think he would call it clarifying. He is trying to speak more clearly with a more unified voice, and the whole process for him of getting to what we think of as a classic Rothko, it's not one of color. The color is already here. It's even not a matter of organization. It's a matter of, I think, really daring to just say things as directly, and I think, again, he would say as clearly as possible. So these are both, the one on the left is dated 48. I don't know. The one on the right is dated 49. Nothing was dated until it left his studio, and he wasn't selling very much except for your painting at this time of his career. So things were dated much later. So, but we know it's in that 48, 49 period, and by the end of 49, he is painting things like dun 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 dun. So the painting on the left is from the Hirshhorn Gallery, and the one on the right is from MoMA. It was gifted by my mother to MoMA, and that is amongst the first sort of classic paintings, what we would really sort of recognize as a Rothko, but still 1949.
Yeah, in the discussion that you and I had before about the whole strata, almost archaeological in the way that he's structuring these, and I love this quote, although how accurate this quote is, when he was actually on a trip with your sister and your mother, 1959, and he was in Paestum and had an opportunity to go to look at the Greek temples, and you talked about the architectural elements that he's exploring through this period of experimentation, and meeting two young Italians who asking what they were doing there, and he was there to paint, and they wanted to know if he was there to paint the temples. And he said, I think the quote is, without knowing it, I've been painting Greek temples all my life.
So these are two more early examples of his classic style, both dated 50, 51. People think that he kind of gets to this 2 or 3 rectangle style, then he's kind of got it, and he just keeps churning out paintings. But I think if you look at these two and continue to look at some of the paintings that we're going to show you tonight, there's maybe the idea of these color fields, but there's no formula. Every painting is really quite different. They're different in terms of how they're composed, but they're also very different in terms of their feeling. So it's very clear to me that he doesn't start with a formula. He really sort of starts over with each painting and builds it up from there and sort of see how it develops, which is very, it's tuned in very much to his own internal processes.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, these are two of the few paintings that are not in Florence, but this one is, and this is a glorious painting from 1958 that's at the Tate Gallery, or now the Tate Modern in London. And this will be in Florence. That was an early coup. It was getting the Tate to loan. It's amazing if you get one important museum to loan, the others will follow. So this was both a great painting in and of itself, but it also opened a lot of doors for us.
What was the fine print on that one like?
I had to get it back to them in the same condition. I think that's the primary one.
Okay. And this by this point we're at 1957. Is that correct?
57 or 58, I apologize. There are two very similar paintings, and the Tate has one of them, and my buddy Robert Manushin has the other, and I can't remember which is 50. And that one hung in the Seagram building for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. Made at the same time as the murals that are now at the Tate, the so-called Seagram murals.
And then this is the great orange and maroon number 8 from 1960. This is Rotterdam.
This is Rotterdam from the Boymans Museum. This is actually something. I'll use this as an example of what makes me really crazy. So we have these huge exhibitions with tens, hundreds of thousands of visitors, and we get news in the art press, but it can be a real struggle to get an article in a newspaper, and in this country at least, never on TV. Never on TV. Well, this painting got scratched by a young kid about a year and a half ago, and thank you. They've just successfully conserved it, and it's still going to come to Florence. For a while there, it was sort of dicey, but this was covered in every newspaper around the world, and it even got a TV spot in America. So they won't cover an art event. They will only cover like a damage of a valuable object. You know, this is just like, you know, somebody's fancy car got bashed in. That's news. Okay, it's kind of the same thing. So okay, I'm gonna get off my soapbox now. But in any case, it's a marvelous painting, quite large. And during the 60s, my father's paintings become increasingly horizontal, even if they are still also taller than they are wide, and that's not always the case. The rectangles themselves become quite wide, and I feel like he's really trying to fill your whole field of vision and have you get sort of almost subsumed in the painting in the process of viewing it.
So this is your second quote that you've added.
Okay. Not sure I can read this. My eyes are getting sticky. Let's see. It is a widely accepted notion that amongst painters, that it does not matter what one paints as long as it is well painted. This is the essence of academicism. There is no such thing as good painting about nothing. We assert that the subject is crucial and the only subject matter that is valid, which is tragic and timeless. And this was a statement that my father made with his buddy Adolf Gottlieb in 1943. This was actually in a response to a very negative review of both of their paintings in a group exhibition in that year, and it prompted them to stop just kind of moaning and carping to each other and actually put this down on paper. And they actually even got a radio spot on WNYC, and essentially read their little manifesto.
And this did get in the paper. This is the New York Times.
Yes, it was also in the Times. So they got coverage of both NYC and in the New York Times. But I included this here because, again, in our whole sort of this whole question of well, what is he doing? Where is he finding clarity? But it's not just okay. We found clarity in that he is now painting paintings that don't have all this stuff going on in them. It's just a couple of colors, and perhaps that's clarity. But is there anything there? And I mean, again, he would answer, absolutely. I can't paint something apparently this void without there being real substance. So this is actually still before he's painting the classic paintings, but even at that moment, he is very clear that you have to have subject matter. You don't just paint what looks good. You have to be communicating something that's real.
So then this takes us to some previews of the upcoming exhibition, as I mentioned, opening 14th of March, I think, through middle of July. And this is really extraordinary to see. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that your father only worked on 3 site-specific series, one for Harvard, one for the Seagram's building, which ended up not being installed, and then the chapel itself in Houston, none of which he had a chance to, the Mount Holyoke, the Holyoke.
Harvard he was able to view.
Yeah, he would have. So, but this is very different site-specific.
So this exhibition, which has been in process, or a very disjuncted process for almost 15 years, as we've tried to find the right venue and a city government that was stable enough in Florence to actually bring this off. Because when the government changes, the previous plans for cultural events get thrown out, and there's a new person in who has their own plans. And so, in any case, we're now working with the fabulous Palazzo Strozzi, which is a private foundation. They have wonderful relationships with some of the city-run museums, which we'll talk about in a second. But this is a 1494 Renaissance palace in the heart of Florence, and it's really just such a great opportunity for my sister and me to really document a little bit our father's love affair with Italy. He really only had 3 major trips out of the U.S. during his lifetime, and they were all primarily to Italy, where he just immersed himself in Roman antiquities and Italian Renaissance art. Not just looking at these works, but actually arguing with the artists, like looking at what Michelangelo was doing, looking at what Da Vinci is doing, seeing that they're really trying to work out some of the same questions that he's trying to work out in his book and in his paintings, and not always sure that they're getting it right, but going back and seeing and looking at more and more until he really has a full understanding of what they're doing, which really is it pushes him forward a great deal in his own understanding of what it means to be an artist, and also what it means to paint art that is communicative to a public.
And these will be organized chronologically?
Yes, so the exhibition is organized chronologically. It is a retrospective. So the first gallery, where it's a little hard to see the paintings because they're much smaller, but it does include Tiresias way down on the end there, if you can see it, and Portrait of Mary on the left. So that is so we have a gallery that takes us through those first years of both figurative painting and surrealism. And then on to a gallery that shows multiform paintings into these transitional works that take us to the classic period. And many of these windows will be blocked, but it's very intentional to put these in conversation with the architecture of the building, which is deliciously quiet and simple, and yet every step you take through there, you're just feeling the history of this nearly 600-year-old palace. Actually, more than nearly 600-year-old, 530-something-year-old palace. So 31. See, I believe I was a math jock once upon a time. Those days are past. So I'm not. Yeah, just this is really for you to hopefully get lured to coming to Florence. It opens in March, which is pre-tourism too. So you can get there and actually have the place to yourself. Walk into the Uffizi without buying a ticket in advance, and have a lot of good meals without 1,000 people sharing the restaurant with you. So, but even if you come in the summer, it's still glorious, and really I do encourage you to come. It's going to be magical, and not just because of Palazzo Strozzi, but because are we? Is that our next slide?
We're just two more.
Oh yes, so these are late works on paper, which are. Did anybody happen to see the exhibition at the National Gallery in Washington 2 years ago of works on paper? I see a hand there in the middle. So, little known to most people, my father painted almost 1,000 paintings on paper in his career, including a couple different periods where he's painting exclusively on paper. And at the end of his life, initially for health reasons, and then because he just gets caught up in a love of the material and new experiments, paints a great number of paintings on paper. So we have a gallery at the end of late works on paper, some of which are very dark and many of which are deliciously colorful. There was a particular sort of terracotta color that always actually makes me think of Italy, that he came to and revisited many times during this period. But we are also putting Rothko in direct conversation with some of the works that he acknowledged were influences on his own work. So this is the Michelangelo's vestibule for the Laurentian Library. The Laurentian Library is an amazing compendium of buildings and books and artifacts and historic drawings. And it's a building that has been added to over time. Michelangelo's edition is one of the last, if not the last, in the. But my father went to this famous room and saw these sort of fake windows and sort of saw an opportunity to create a sort of hermetically sealed space, which is what he attempted to do with his Seagram paintings, where he was going to have a small dining room space where he could basically surround the viewer with his mural paintings and not really give him the opportunity to look at anything else.
So actually the quote that I have, and again, whether it's a real quote or not, this was written, published in 1970, somebody who was recounting the conversation that they had referring specifically to the Seagram series. After I had been at work for some time on them, I realized that I was much influenced subconsciously by Michelangelo's walls in the staircase room of the Medicean Library of San Lorenzo. He achieved just the kind of feeling I'm after, Rothko said. He makes the viewers feel that they are trapped in a room where all the doors and windows are bricked up so that all they can do is butt their heads forever against the wall.
Feeling invited?
So
It was a private dining room, so this may have been also my father was a lifelong socialist, so this may have also been him not really being that keen about painting a dining room for the rich and famous.
So I couldn't help but juxtapose it with one of the preparatory drawings by Michelangelo himself from the 1520s for that space. And reading this in elevation, again, just the way that your father was looking at the temples and looking at so many different sources. But even the structure, when I was looking at this drawing that's in the Casa Buonarroti in Florence, it actually has, to my eye, a very Rothkoian semblance. And thinking back on Michelangelo, who's recorded already in 1550 by one of his biographers, Giorgio Vasari, referring to the way that Michelangelo had approached this project in measure, order, and rule is quite different from those who have worked following the common usage and following antiquity. And specifically, the idea that encapsulates in this project is his unforgettable comment to break the ties and chains of the common road, as it was called during that period of time. And it struck me and it resonated also because your father, again, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but I love this quote, that when he was at the Tate Gallery going through 1961 with the then director, and he's looking at all these 19th century William Turners, and he reportedly quipped, "That chap Turner learned a lot from me." I could imagine him saying the same about Michelangelo in the Laurentian Library.
So that is a little study for the Seagram murals on that wall on the left. The next photo is a little easier to see. There's a second study. So we're really just contextualizing them. We're not trying to shout down Michelangelo, but we are trying to put them in back in touch with their source. And here's a room. Here's the room at the Tate. There are actually 9 murals in that room, but these are what those little 1 yard, 3 feet by 2 foot studies turned into. These are quite massive panels, about 15 feet long in a lot of cases.
And you can really see the architectural, structural, spatial configuration of these, which seems to resonate so much.
Absolutely. And then our final a trick of putting Rothko in direct contact with the artist who most influenced him. He went to the convent of San Marco in Florence, and where Fra Angelico painted a fresco. There are 46 monk cells, and he and his assistants painted a fresco in every single one of those cells. And my father, I think, just thought it was the most deeply spiritual experience he had ever had. And he went there one afternoon, and then he had to go back the next morning. He couldn't get it out of his head. So in 5 of those cells, we were going to put very small Rothko paintings from different periods. This is a surreal painting called Gethsemane. And here is a multiform from probably 47. I think it might be dated 48. I'm not sure I agree. Doesn't really matter, does it? And this is just about the smallest canvas he ever painted. It's only about 15 inches square. It's absolutely delicious, and it's going to have a great time talking to the Fra Angelico fresco in the room. And this is a 1953, again, small work on paper with very, I not only wanted relatively muted colors, but I wanted muted textures. Both this and the previous painting have almost like a powdery texture to the surface, which reminded me of frescoes, which of course painted directly on the wall. Not painted on the wall, they are part of the substance of the wall, and they have that sort of tactile feel of something that is not shiny, but very matte and again, has that sort of, by definition, sort of stony, plastery quality.
And so that brings us to, I'm not sure the end of the journey to clarity, but it brings us to the end of the presentation this evening. So thank you very much, Christopher. It's been extraordinary.
Thank you.
So we have microphones for people if you have any questions for Christopher. I see there are a couple of hands up, Amanda, about 3/4 of the way up. Ed, I don't know if we can turn the lights on as well.
Thank you very much. My question is technical. Uh, if he's staining his canvases, are they gessoed beforehand, or is he staining the canvas directly into the warp and weft of the linen?
So yeah, the only panel with actually two panels we saw with gesso tonight are that little odalisque and the two women at the window in that sort of triptych of early paintings I showed. So he's very deliberately going back to an old style on those. But by the time he's actually staining the canvas, 25 years later or so, or 20 years later in the case of the Vassar painting, he is not preparing it in any way. I don't know if that first layer has any other elements in it. I mean, he may have some sort of binder element in there. He mixed his own paints. Just really was making his own homebrew all the time with certainly using a lot of rabbit skin glue, using a lot of egg. But I don't know that anyone has actually deciphered what is in that bottom layer as opposed to the layers that he continued to add, staining the canvas one on top of another.
Who stretched the canvases with him?
So as Dr. Thurber and I were just talking a little bit earlier, he made his own stretchers and stretched his own canvases up until that Sequin project in 1958. And there are many Rothko rectangular paintings that are not particularly rectangular. We have to every time we have to replace a stretcher, we have to get it custom made because the paintings, it's just not to square.
Could you tell us about the status of the chapel in Houston?
Absolutely. So I'm going to give you the good news, the bad news, and the good news. So the good news is that, and this is actually something that I worked on for 12 plus years, is that we restored the chapel. And it was completed smack dab in the middle of COVID for our 50th anniversary in 2021. And it's back to the original lighting plan with, an open skylight, although heavily filtered with louvers. And the space is really as magical as it's ever been. You can see the paintings better, and you have just a much greater sense of space there. There were all sorts of things put under that skylight for years to both block the light, and get the light to the paintings, but they were not terribly successful. So that's the good news. The bad news, and this is what I think you're referring to, is that we did have hurricane damage about a year and a half ago, and there was water that got in on one wall of the chapel, and there is one triptych. So if you've been to the Rothko Chapel, it's 14 paintings, 3 triptychs, and 5 single panels. You're surrounded in an octagon. One of the triptychs is in conservation. I actually got an update today. 2 of those 3 panels are finished. The conservation's finished, but the third panel was more significantly damaged, and there's just no rushing these. They're the most minimal paintings he ever painted. There's absolutely no place to hide any kind of intervention. So they're estimating still another year and a half to complete that. When the water got in there, that actually allowed them to see how many layers. There are 17 layers of not just paint, but different substances on those paintings, which have to be built up one over another in fixing it. So we're going to have the party we didn't get to have in the middle of COVID for the 50th anniversary of the chapel when we reopen, and you're all invited. Yes, I see lots of hands. I guess you're supposed to wait for microphones. So.
I've got a microphone, so I'm going to go ahead with another.
I don't see you, but I'm going to trust that you're really a person, not an AI bot of some sort.
I'm real. I'm curious about his framing, because I know that, these are very reductive pieces, and how do you how did he frame his works, and how do you keep that continuity now as you move these into these different spaces?
So, starting with the multiforms, the sort of abstract but colorful pieces, but are not yet in the classic style. He stops using frames pretty early in that process, and I'm going to break it to Bart. We are hoping to take your painting out of the frame in Florence. Is that a deal breaker? It's going to be the other only frame.
No, but I'm
otherwise.
glad we know now.
That the registrar hadn't talked to you about that. It's probably in the loan agreement somewhere. But
I need to read the fine print as well.
but earlier than that, it's pretty haphazard. And remember, he is selling almost no paintings up until the mid 1940s. So those surrealist paintings, and particularly the figurative paintings, if he sold one, it would get framed, and it would probably get framed by the buyer, not by him. If he had a painting in a show, it would get framed by the dealer, but most of those were group shows. So again, it's pretty haphazard. We do have a few paintings, including The Girl with the Pointed Ass, that are in what we believe is an original frame, but it's unlikely that he even was very involved in the process of picking that out. I don't think.
I was wondering more about what his process looked like. I think of like having so many layers. It's kind of like, what are you working on during the time those layers are setting the way you want? Like, did he work on many pieces simultaneously, or was he focused on kind of one at a time and like allowing those layers to like fully dry or set, or working on them while they're still kind of tacky? Or
You're a painter, aren't you?
Yes.
So right now, in part because we have so many paintings on loan, we don't have any Rothko up, but we have a bunch of paintings by somebody who became a very, very close friend of his, an artist named William Scharf, who was teaching out in San Francisco and then coming back to New York, and his paintings weren't dry, and so he started painting in acrylic for exactly that reason. And my father actually experimented with acrylics very late in his life, but before that he's painting in oil paints, and yes, you're painting all those layers and you're waiting for them to dry. So yes, to the best of our understanding, there were multiple paintings out at the same time. He did not like having people watch him paint, so we don't have a lot of documentation of this, but clearly we know that there were at least 3 or 4 paintings he was working on at a time. And so the classic photograph of my father, he also didn't like being photographed, but the classic one is him sitting in a chair looking at his painting. And so he's painting this layer, and then he's thinking, like, what's his next move? I think he has a plan, but he's also seeing what's happening, and he's also seeing what's happening in him, and figuring out what's going to happen next. But yes, there is a waiting process.
Thank you.
I was curious. I saw at Pace somewhere like in the last decade a show of his, and there was a lot of those late paintings on paper, acrylic. I'm pretty sure it was, and they were on canvas. So I was really curious, how that decision came about. I'm assuming it didn't happen in his lifetime, but if you could inform me.
Yes, so that was the Dark Palette show, which I hope you loved as much as I did. I particularly loved. I didn't show a lot tonight, and I don't know why that is, because I usually show a lot of late dark work, although they're actually wonderful earlier dark works. They don't show up on screen that well as part of the reason. But yes, so he not only talks the talk, but walks the walk with the works on paper too, in terms of not framing them. So in his lifetime, he never frames one of those classic abstractions, and there are many, many paintings on paper from the classic period. He would mount them, or have mounted, on boards, sometimes on canvas, but many times on really terrible multi-layered wood panels that have since started to deteriorate. And we literally had to have one of his greatest paintings from '59. We literally had to have it chipped, the wood chipped off from the back, because, like, literally with a chisel. I am still in awe of this conservator who had the nerve to do this, because the support had disintegrated, and the painting was still but the painting, thank goodness, was still in great shape. But we have, and when I say we, whenever you hear the we, that is not the royal we, that's my sister and me, because she is my partner in crime for many, many decades now. And we have tried to honor his wishes, but try to come up with ways of doing this which are both better for the viewer, but also better for the paper, because you don't really want paper mounted on something, because the paper is going to constantly move. Paper is an organic substance, and if it's on some sort of mount that doesn't move, it's not good for the paper. And we now are using a Japanese method called karibari, where it's mounted on multiple layers of Japanese paper, and then those are connected to, in some cases, a wooden frame, in some cases, an aluminum frame. But we have used canvas many times in the past, always with some sort of pace that is very forgiving and reversible. So we can literally, in some cases, like take the painting and pull it off the canvas. Please don't do that. But
So we have two last questions, and then leave time for everyone to get into the galleries and look at the paintings. So I've got one over here, and then one up front.
Thank you very much. This was immensely interesting. But I want to move away from the materials to the ideas. I
like materials too, but
I do too, but I was both intrigued and puzzled by the joint statement with Gottlieb that referred to the subject matter should be both tragic and timeless. And I was wondering, let's set aside the timelessness, which is easier to understand, but can you illuminate that in any sense, both in terms of the context in which they wrote that, but also what might have been meant by saying that the subject of a painting should be tragic?
So my father actually talks about this or around that question quite a bit. And he says at one point he wants to paint it's not about color, he wants to paint tragedy, ecstasy, doom. So those basic human emotions. But he keeps coming back to tragedy. He's very influenced by Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy. But he's reading a lot of Shakespeare, he's reading a lot of the Greeks. He says at one point in The Artist's Reality, and it's actually grammatically incorrect. He says that the greatest coalescer, which I don't believe is a word, of our human sentiments, what makes us all feel human and makes us all feel connected, is a common tragic end. So I think he says, sort of like the mystery of our death and what happens is something that brings us all together. And he never says this, but I actually just thought about this in the moment. What are the Shakespeare plays we remember? We remember Macbeth. We remember Lear. We remember Hamlet, right? Those are the tragedies that we really come back to. Don't start talking to me about Midsummer Night's Dream. It's a piece of fluff. But also with the Greeks. What do we remember? We remember the Sophoclean tragedies. We remember Oedipus and Aeschylus. So it's not to say that the other writings aren't great. It's just those really capture the essences of what gets under our skin. And there's nothing he wants to do more than get under your skin. Is that fair? Do you have something to add to that, Bart? Because
Absolutely not. You said it perfectly.
That was probably a perfect way to end this evening, but I just wondered if you would talk a bit about your father's relationships with some of the other painters that he was in constant dialogue with. Obviously, that quote with Gottlieb is a terrific early one, but I wonder in terms of the ways they both use a similar technique about his dialogue with Ad Reinhardt and the idea of making these kind of surfaces that were impossible to imagine how they could be made. So
I'm going to answer the second part second. You actually gave me an opportunity to plug another show. So there's going to be a fabulous, smaller but still not so small show in Cape Ann, Massachusetts, in Gloucester, Massachusetts. If you've never been to the Cape Ann Museum, it's a wonderful museum. This is not Cape Cod, this is Cape Ann, which is up at the northernmost corner of Massachusetts. And that has been both a place for summer homes, but also an artist colony, in addition being the busiest fishing port on the East Coast for hundreds of years. Wonderful town, wonderful museum. So Milton Avery, who was really a mentor to both Gottlieb and my father, had a summer home there. And 2 different summers, my father and Adolf Gottlieb went up and painted with him. And we're going to do a show that shows their watercolors painting the same scenes, the 3 of them side by side, seeing the same scenes, and then following each of their careers actually into abstraction. So it's going to be a wonderful show that opens in June and runs through, I think, September.
We're lending to that too.
Oh, fabulous.
Not Rothko, of course, but Avery.
Avery, fabulous. So really can't recommend that show highly enough, even though it hasn't opened. I'm confident it's going to be great.
And I think it then travels to the Phillips, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it travels to the Phillips in Washington. So those were actually probably his 2 closest friends, although he was off and on. He was very close to Barnett Newman, as Newman was to a number of artists. Newman fell out with everybody, including my father. Yeah, Newman, Gottlieb, and my father were really sort of a trio in the time that they write that manifesto. Newman participates in that manifesto, but then won't sign his name. So in any case, my father, he never hung out down in the Cedar Bar, so he was never really hanging out with Pollock and de Kooning. But they all knew each other, and they went to each other's shows. My father insisted that Peggy Guggenheim give Clifford Still his first show as a solo artist, brought him from San Francisco, so they were all close and all watching what each other were doing. He and Ad Reinhardt, I don't know that much about their relationship. There's very little documentation of it, but yes, they are both working on those surfaces that you have to spend a lot of time to decipher. And I think that's I can't say for Reinhardt, who's, by the way, I think the first out of that whole group to abstraction. Really fabulous early abstractions from him in the 40s. But with both of these painters, you have to, my father very consciously gives up the brighter colors and knows that he's giving up some viewers who are going to just walk by in a gallery or museum, but he knows that the ones who stay are going to have to look longer and have the deeper conversation. And I think, to me, that's what those dark paintings are about, is really getting inside the painting, but inside yourself as well.
So with that, we encourage everyone to go into the galleries and get into the paintings. Thank you.